Hi, everybody, and welcome to Forward Motion. I'm Karen Allyn. Okay, this is a very serious subject, but we're sort of going to have fun with it, my guest today. How difficult is it to move smoothly through the transitions of life? When it comes to aging and preparing for the sunset years, even death, it's stunningly difficult. The duo I welcome today have written a new book called Love's Way. I'll show you a shot of that book. My earpiece is coming out, so ignore that. We have a shot of the book? Anyway, it looks like this, Love's Way. Tough conversations, solutions through compassionate communication. Carolyn Parr and Sig Cohen, a partnership of many years, unmarried to each other, married to others, but in business together. And what a lovely thing, really, that you have respect for each other's families and you've had a great business together. And you yourselves have been aging over the years. Now you're mediators, so you're really good at compassionate conversation, give and take.
We hope so.
And I know you all, I want to say that you have a wonderful blog and website with a ton of information on these things and others related to this, and it's called toughconversations.net. So we definitely want to put that out there so people can go find information out. Okay, so Love's Way, living peacefully with your family as your parents age. That is a pretty tough topic. We're not ready when it comes. Ourselves, we're not ready. We haven't made the arrangements. A lot of us, or many people, are leaving their kids completely gobsmacked with not knowing what to do because they haven't made plans, etc. You're here to change that. And as really the population ages, we need that more and more.
Correct.
Because we are getting older, and sometimes disease sets in, and disorders, and Alzheimer's and things like that, and we're not able to take care of manage our affairs. So no matter what age you are, really, if you are in a relationship or whatever, and you have kids, you should be thinking about planning for the future.
Exactly.
Is that the reason why you wrote this book, Carolyn?
Yes, we wrote this book to help people because we were seeing a lot of suffering in our mediations. People were coming to us who couldn't speak to their siblings and couldn't collaborate in taking care of the parents that needed their help, and parents came to us saying, my children are squabbling over who's going to live with me and what's happening to the money and who's going to be my power of attorney, and I don't like that. I want them to love each other, but I don't know what to do about it, and can you help us? And so after seeing a lot of that and hearing a lot of stories and actually seeing a lot of success and helping families prevent this kind of stuff and heal from the wounds that were already there, we decided to write our book.
Because you have been dealing with these kinds of issues, tough conversations and ways to be compassionate in relationships for many years.
Right.
And as mediators in the judicial system is how you met decades ago, right?
Through the DC Superior Court.
So that's a good place to mediate.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of people need mediation these days, and it's certainly a lot cheaper than hiring attorneys.
Oh, right. And faster.
And faster. And if you don't have, you know, too serious of issues that could make you unable to communicate correctly, mediation's a great idea. So good for you guys.
Thank you.
Sig, what made you decide that this book is, you know, you're both in your 80s, early 80s.
Right.
And it's kind of your aging now, too. So does this have to do with your lives, too?
Absolutely. I mean, the stories that we tell are both from the cases we've mediated as well as personal stories or stories we've heard from our friends. And the stories, it's sort of the sum total of these stories are in the book. Just trying to show examples of what can go wrong and what can go right. I mean, if you like, I can give you some examples.
We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, what do parents do wrong and what do children do wrong?
One of the things parents do wrong is to favor one child over another.
You do write about that. It's almost impossible to imagine, but yet all those stories in the book ring true.
Well, they don't know they're doing it a lot of times.
They don't realize
it's
it.
unconscious, you know.
Yeah.
One maybe needs them more than the other one. Children have different personalities, and one is more compatible with the parent. Sometimes the children get caught in a war between parents, and they suffer that way. But it does have lasting consequences into adulthood and into old age when one child feels disfavored over another.
and rightly so, actually. It would
Yes.
be difficult to understand when you're a kid. Wait a minute, just because you're married, they didn't leave, they thought you'd be taken care of, so they didn't leave married, money, et cetera. So.
Well, it happens in wills when a parent feels like one child needs more money than another one, and it may be true.
Right.
The mistake is not to talk to the child who's going to get less about the plan and see if they agree, because a lot of times they will agree if they understand that it's not a reflection of how the parent feels about them.
Right. It's so true that communication is what it all comes down to. Isn't that right, Sick?
And transparency.
Yes.
It's critical that, as Carolyn said, that a parent be transparent. And the other thing is assumptions. Sometimes a sibling will assume that the parent prefers or favors the child. But they won't find that out until they have the conversation. They somehow got to get into the conversation.
You actually write in your book that Aretha Franklin and Prince, you'd never think that they wouldn't have in complete and very vivid instructions on their property, their money, their businesses, and they didn't.
Didn't.
And Aretha knew that she was dying for a while, so that blows my mind. But Prince, of course, that was more sudden, but still, when you're that kind of person. So if they can't do it, how many of us aren't doing it?
I tell you something, I have a friend who's a probate lawyer, and I can't tell you who the person was, but she had a Supreme Court justice who died without a will. It's just crazy.
Unbelievable.
It completely blows your mind.
Wow, that's, you write that 44% of the people in a Gallup poll had a will. That's not a lot of people. That's not even half, and we know how important it is. Or like, for example, durable power of attorney and advance directives. Can you talk briefly about what those are? Because I know it's been said a lot on a variety of media that you should have those things, but just briefly, why do we need those things and what are they?
Well, a durable power of attorney relates mainly, and I'm not an attorney, by the way. I don't have a legal background, but mainly to decision-making over financial affairs. In other words, when an individual loses the capacity to make decisions, is there someone who's been appointed to make those decisions for him or her?
And there needs to be.
There needs to be.
That's what your book says, and that's what we know.
As well as a fallback person. So that, God forbid, if somebody loses the capacity, they're not stuck. They're not.
And also advance directives.
Advance directives.
Crucial.
Particularly so in terms of having both a living will and a healthcare proxy. A living will stating what kinds of treatment you want when you are in a serious situation. And with a healthcare proxy, again, appointing someone to represent you to make those decisions. And let me say that one of the most important decisions is where you want to die. Do you want to die at home? Do you want to die in the hospital? I checked my healthcare power of attorney the other day, just reams of legalese. I could not find where it said where I want to die. And I think that's really critical. How many people want to die in an ICU?
Absolutely.
As opposed to being at home with a far better quality of life and their family around them.
And the DNR issue, do not resuscitate issue, which I think most people now, from just talking to so many people, I guess it's anecdotal. People do not want to be resuscitated if they're in such a state that it won't help them and it will cause further pain to their bodies, their families, and they are terminal anyway, often.
Right. I think whether to have a DNR is, that means do not resuscitate. It depends on where you are in your health. Like, I would not want a DNR right now posted on my refrigerator because I'm in good health, I feel fine, and if I passed out, I'd want somebody to try to resuscitate me. But when you've been diagnosed with a fatal illness.
Stage 5 cancer.
Yeah, stage 5 cancer.
There is no stage 5 really,
Yeah.
so yeah. When you're,
you don't really want somebody to bring you back, and especially if they have to break your chest bones.
Exactly.
And some of the stuff they sometimes do. So then people ought to get a DNR and have it on their refrigerator, because that's where the
EMT.
EMT people look for it.
Just to let people know, something your book says I thought was great. You give out a website called makingyourwishesknown.com. So people can go there to prepare advance directives.
Yes.
You don't necessarily have to call a lawyer so fast. First you can figure out what it is and learn a little bit about it, and you can actually go to makingyourwishesknown.com.
Right.
So
And
you
it-
have a lot of resources in this book for people to go to for a lot of do-it-yourself type of stuff.
The state
regarding
of
aging.
Maryland has forms for financial powers of attorney and advance directives that you can just take right off the form, and it's the state provides the form, and it also tells you specifically exactly how many witnesses you have to have and whether it needs to be
So whatever
notarized.
state you're in, you should check the state.
Most states have that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's very important. Also, guardianship. Can you explain that real quick?
Yes, a guardianship is when someone is completely incompetent and another person is appointed to handle their life, basically. It's a radical thing to have a guardian, because it means you lose more control over your life than a prisoner does. There are ways to avoid that. One is to give the powers of attorney to people ahead of time, so there's no reason to have a guardian or to seek a guardian.
Right. Because we've all read the newspaper, all these tales of guardians completely wiping people out of everything they have and own and making decisions that are horrible. So
Yes.
that's not everybody, of course. You might know a good guardian, but you just got to beware, I think. Buyer beware.
Well, usually the court tries to appoint a guardian who's related to the person or something, but sometimes there'll be fights about who it should be, and
Right.
it can get very ugly. So there's another reason that it's really important to have powers of attorney in place and medical directives in place. But there are alternatives to a guardianship. You want to talk about that a little bit?
It's called supported decision making, and you can actually go to a supporteddecisionmaking.org, which is not as draconian as a guardianship. And I don't want to get into a lot of details about it, but there are the courts use the term least restrictive, and they prefer to have arrangements where a person who has lost some level or of their capacity to be in the least restrictive arrangement, so that
Okay.
it doesn't have to go the full route of guardianship.
That's good to know, of course. What advice? What do you tell your people that you have mediated over the years? What have been some of the problems that you've seen that you have been able to help people with, or at least point them in the right direction?
One is do some research. Find out what the resources are. If mom is living in another city, maybe mom, because she feels so strongly about her autonomy, maybe hasn't checked out where the best medical facilities are, where there's aids, where there's various kinds of nutrition programs. So oftentimes, being a remote caregiver, it's up to that individual to do, as well as a family caregiver, to do some research, find out where the resources are, because they're there if you look hard enough for them.
And a lot of people want to be aging in place.
Right.
That's a big term right now.
Right.
Aging in place, meaning staying at home as long as they can.
Right.
And there's actually a lot of wonderful charities and organizations that help people stay age in place.
Along with the village movement. I don't know if you've heard about the village.
Talk about that.
The village movement is throughout the United States. There's these are community-based local nonprofits that have been formed to enable older people to age in place. There are quite a number of villages in this part of the greater Washington area. There's village-to-village-network.org, vtvnetwork.org, which will give you a map of all the villages in the United States. And in this area, there's a Washington Area Village Exchange that people can find out about villages.
Very helpful.
Yeah. So
It's all about community, really. Even
about-
within your family, it's all about community,
Again.
communication, and, as you said, transparency.
and research.
And research, that of course, it's always a big one, right, Carolyn?
Yeah. One of the biggest issues that we see over and over is a parent, say, has fallen and is living alone. And the children weigh in and say, Mom, you have to move. You have to go into assisted living. Or one child says, Mom, you have to move in with me. Or somebody else says, I'll move in with you. And then all of a sudden, mom is saying, get off my back. I want to be in charge of my own life. And the kids are fighting with each other over what the solution should be.
And who should pay for it?
And who should pay for it, and how much it should cost, because some assisted living places are very high scale. And sometimes there's a fight about if one kid moves in to help mom, should that kid get paid? Should she be paying rent to mom? There's all this stuff.
It's a tough one.
Yeah,
'Cause
but
what person wants to lose control at all? And yet it seems inevitable, which is pretty scary when you're my age, which is getting up there too.
it's the role changing is a huge issue.
Role reversal.
Yeah,
And-
yeah. When the parents become, the kids, and
Or-
their kids take care of the parents,
Yeah.
and it's
It's
the sandwich generation. They've got their
Yeah.
own kids. I mean, it's just a lot. It's a lot as we live longer.
Yeah, the whole
That sandwich. Yeah.
caregiving situation in the U.S. is terrible.
Let's talk about caregiving for a minute, because you do address that. Talk about that a little, Carolyn.
Well, most of the caregiving in the country is done without compensation by family members, and the average caregiver is a 48-year-old woman with a full-time job and a child still living at home.
Yeah.
So it's a nightmare.
And you write that
And-
41.6 million Americans are caregivers today.
Yes.
Staggering. 56% are women.
and
84% have children.
Right.
And
Yeah.
45% the sandwich generation. And 62% have full-time jobs. How do they do it?
It's a financial, emotional, psychological bind that many are in because they weren't prepared, they don't have the resources, and they may not be getting the support from other family members.
Yeah.
So the question is, how can the family become a team and collaborate together? And that's one of the things that mediation affords people. If they can't agree, just on the issue of caregiving, we're not therapists trying to help them
Right.
mend their long-term wounds. We're there just to help them come up with a solution to what can we do for mom that will be in her best interest and protect her goals of living safely and as independently as possible, and yet have that kind of collaborative relationship among the siblings. Critical.
The important thing that often gets forgotten is, what does mom want to do?
Exactly.
Right. Because we kind of tend to take over, like, we need you to do this so you're safe. And that just completely obliterates her not just desire and demand for control, her right.
And her
That's-
dignity.
Oh,
Yeah.
huge. Yeah.
And, there are people who say, look, I'd rather be found lying on the floor dead than to have to move. That's extreme. But there are so many options that people can have other than choosing to go into a assisted living or to stay in their home. You can stay in your home with help from outside. You can stay in your home by getting changes made in your home, making it more wheelchair friendly or
Right.
whatever. By getting together, marshaling the resources that are there in the neighborhood to get Meals on Wheels or whatever is needed. But when we bring a family together in a mediation, for example, you try to have a brainstorming about, okay, mom really wants to be in her home. And you ask her, why do you want to stay there? And sometimes you find out it's because she's close to her doctors or she can go to church. And then there might be other ways to do that. Well, Mom, what if I commit myself to take you to church every Sunday? Or what if, would you be willing to think about something else? The idea of mediation is to find a win-win situation that really speaks to what people need. Sometimes we focus on one solution as if that's the only solution, and we're thinking that's the only solution at the time, but probably not. If you can get into a brainstorming mode and say, what is the interest here that we're trying to resolve? You can come up with a dozen alternatives.
Right. No two outcomes are the same.
Yeah, it must have been in your mediation experience, you must have had a variety of things going on, that different approaches that people took and different needs. And you were prepared to handle that, I assume?
Well, the critical thing is to get people to listen to each other
Yeah.
and listen to understand and not to reply. So how do you get people first just to do that listening process? And
That's
then
very hard.
it's very hard because we're not, most of the time, we're not listening, or if we're listening, we have an answer running in our head.
We have an agenda.
We have an agenda. So how do we get people to listen? And secondly, how do we build equity among everybody so that the sibling who had a lot of influence as the kids were growing up, how to get everybody to have a sense of equity and they're all on the same playing ground?
I mean, so-and-so is out of town, and this one's close, and yet mom gives the power of attorney to the one out of town
Yeah.
because he's a lawyer, but the
Exactly.
sisters are living here. Does that sound familiar? Oh, wait a minute. Anyway.
Because we had a case like that.
Yeah, well, I lived that. But anyway, let's not go there. But bottom line is that is excruciatingly difficult
Yeah.
to maneuver when you have a loved one and you cannot get together between siblings, and you cannot get and you know, and the patient, or the parent, and it's a mess. I don't know what the answer is. Listen is one, of course, but everyone has a different agenda, and they're right.
But if they put their parent first,
Yeah.
they put their parent first, that's key. And to include the parent, that's the transparency piece again. The parent, as long as they've got some level of capacity, should be part of that process,
Right.
part of the mediation. That's one of the first things we learned in the training we took in elder mediation, that you
Really?
can't exclude anyone.
The burden that it is, though, is anyone who's been through any of this knows that the burden is so, and the guilt, you know, from our part, it's I don't know how people could get through it. That's why mediation, I think, is important, so that, as you said, people can listen to each other
Exactly.
and all talk to each other. I love that idea. Going into, just briefly, the dying part and the death part, you talk about how important it is to plan for that.
Talk about
So
it.
that, talk about it, and keep going, Sig. Tell me more.
Well,
'cause
I mean,
people just,
they've now, we write in the book about death cafes. And
yeah, I like that idea.
And it's, I took part in a death cafe, the first one in Washington, and it was interesting because it's a permission giving. We started going around the room, and people were asked to fill in the sentence, death is. And we went around the room, and each person had to say what it was. Either it's a gift, or it's a tragedy, or whatever. But as people talked about it, they implicitly gave each other permission to talk about it. And it's so important because not only are we living longer, we're dying longer. And we have to we have to understand that we've got to be real in terms of what kind of death we want. In the book, we talk about 4 people whom I knew, who died at home, surrounded by their family, with music playing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the grieving began before they actually died. And it was
Right.
the family.
Death with dignity.
With
Palliative care. These are issues that we've covered on FOMO a
you
lot.
have?
Yes, death with
Right.
dignity and palliative care. So important to be able to have control
Exactly.
over when and how you die when you get to that point. Easier said, but of course it's hard for the whole family to do that.
And it's
you know,
hard to talk about. It's hard for
It is.
children to talk about their
It's-
parents' death,
yeah.
and the parents, it's hard for them to confront their own death and dying, and it's also hard for them to bring it up with their children because they know it's going to upset their children. It's a tough topic.
We didn't, of course, weren't able to get to everything in this book, but this is why I want to mention the name again. And Love's Way, Living Peacefully with Your Family as Your Parents Age. There's so many resources in here and so many good ideas, and it's so uplifting. It's like it's, you know, the burden is slightly lifted with you guys and your experience, and I appreciate that so much, and I hope people, there it is on the screen. I hope people read it and also go to toughconversations.net, right?
That's
Right.
our website.
It's your website, and you have all kinds of information there, as I saw myself. You can subscribe to your newsletter too. You guys are never ending with the resources, I will say that. Just real quick before we go, what's next for you two as a partnership? Is there a sequel to this?
We don't have a book in mind yet, but I think we're thinking about expanding or changing our practice to include and maybe to emphasize over-the-phone consultations.
That's a great
one-on-one,
idea.
So
Yeah.
that we could work with people from anywhere in the country who have a situation and they don't know how to handle it, and they, you know, you can help people work with their assumptions and with their feelings, and we're not therapists, but that kind of guidance can be very helpful if you can't bring a whole family together.
And now you've got Skype and you've got WhatsApp and all these apps. It could be free to
Right.
talk from all over the world.
Absolutely.
Right.
I hope you guys live a wonderful rest of your lives.
Thank you.
I know you've planned for everything with your lovely families, and I appreciate you so much coming on FOMO today. All right, so we're talking to Carolyn Miller Parr and Sig Cohen, authors of Love's Way, Living Peacefully with Your Family as Your Parents Age. What a wonderful resource. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
thank you for watching FOMO, everybody. I'm Karen Allyn, and I will see you next time here on FOMO. Take care. Bye-bye.